Yeah, he gave us half of the supply of Dogelon Mars. So at the time, that was worth a lot. I feel like it cracked a billion. I can't remember exactly. When we got it, it was our holdings. Yeah, but like our holdings were somewhere around half a billion. But it appears that microgravity is able to create the sufficiently stressful conditions to accelerate the aging of tissues in some respects. We're doing a data science challenge right now on aging, on biomarkers of aging. And that's one that's, it's pretty low risk for people to participate in. All they have to do is show up with a computer and some expertise, and they can work on it. It's very different though than a hardware or wetware sort of challenge where to even participate probably costs you $1 million. I like my analogy for it is it's like a spam filter. So except for imagine if like in the 90s when you got thousands of erectile dysfunction emails every day, but there was no like spam filter or like send me $1,000 and I'll send you whatever. But you were not sophisticated enough to realize that those were not real messages, and you had to respond to every single one of them and do exactly what they told you to. So that's to me the immune system is a little bit like that, where you have all of these signals that are going out there, and the immune system is just going like, you got it, I'll do what you tell me to. And it ends up protecting zombie cells and protecting tumors and doing all the things that, it's not supposed to do. And
today we're joined with Dane Gobel, co-founder of the Methuselah Foundation, where SENS got its start with aubrey. He is also on the executive committee for Biomarking Aging Consortium, which we get into this episode as well, steering committee for the Longevity Prize, and sheep in chief at We Sheep Can Fly. Today we get into Methuselah's billion-dollar crypto deal, cutting-edge research, feeding people in space, SENS, aubrey, Michael Levin, and even answer fan questions that you all wrote into in advance. Let's stay curious on this episode of Learning with Lowell.
Learning with Lowell. Learning with Lowell is not recorded for live studio audience. We usually take questions. Stay tuned and stay curious.
What's the story with Dogecoin? I see it everywhere with you.
Oh, okay. Well, so we have nothing to do with Dogecoin. Dogecoin was kind of cool. So goodness gracious. Let's see here. So the story it's a token called Dogelon Mars. So it's not Dogecoin, but
okay.
it does include a Shiba or a pseudo Shiba. So what the story was, or is that back in mid 2021, Vitalik had received an awful lot of usually it was a kind of an obscene quantity of tokens, usually oftentimes like half of the supply or just like some really, really significant figure when folks were releasing a new token. So they would just send a whole bunch to Vitalik under the assumption that he wouldn't do anything with it. It was just going to sit there. Probably wouldn't want to have like the tax burden of ever having done anything with it. And so in mid 2021, for whatever reason, he decided to take a lot of those sorts of tokens and distribute them to different charities. So he took a whole bunch of Shiba Inu and he gave it to India COVID. It was a crypto oriented, but India COVID relief charity. And then he took it was a bunch of different charities. We talked to a few of them because we were all kind of in a similar situation of, what are we going to do with this? But in our case, yeah, he gave us half of the supply of Dogelon Mars. So at the time, that was worth a lot. Of course, it's a little bit like it's kind of like Schrodinger's donation. The more that you look at it, you're not sure if it's gonna die. Like it's kind of a strange one in terms of like it's not like somebody sent us a Ethereum which has a lot of liquidity and you can do something with. So it was difficult for us to know what to do with it, but at the time it seemed like we definitely weren't going to dump or anything like that. We didn't want to hurt the community that was there. We try to be decent people. We care about other human beings who are risking their finances on something. So we definitely weren't going to dump. And so we talked for quite a while to try to figure out how to do it. And basically we came up with a slow divesting sort of plan. And then so we started doing some of that early this year. And then by the end of the year, and I can't get into too many details, unfortunately, but there was a group of I'll just put it like very, very aligned to the community folks, to the Dogelon community folks who decided to buy the vast majority of our holdings. So basically we're still supportive of the community where we can be, but most of, I would say, like for 2021 and 22, it was a very, very good thing. We made a lot of wonderful friends in the community. But of course, we're not, crypto is not central to what our organization is meant to do. And so it made an awful lot of sense to kind of steward it for as long as we could. But then when somebody showed up who was going to be able to take the ball and run with it better than we could, then it made sense to give it to the folks who where crypto is their bread and butter, and they know what to do with a token like that. So I mean, I'm a huge fan of VitaDAO and what they've been able to accomplish in terms of kind of using crypto to make it easier to fund longevity science. That's absolutely fantastic. Our approach has been a little bit different there, and so I'm happy that they're able to do what they're doing, and I'm happy that the Dogelon community, I think, now is going to have a better group of folks who have enough skin in the game, who are able to really kind of take it to where it should go for that community. And then I'm glad for us. It's certainly enabled us to do what we do. It's helped to fund a number of different things, and we can maybe talk about it later, but we have a number of different programs that we're working on now, and I don't think that would have really been, unless something else had happened, but I don't think that would have been possible if not for Vitalik making that donation, and for the community, the Dogelon community, being cool with us, being in the room with them. So we're very, very grateful for it happening. It certainly was not something we expected. It was very kind of surreal in a lot of ways. But I think that the outcome has been really good ultimately for everybody. Especially given, how lousy the crypto and the bio winter kind of was this last year or so. It's been kind of tough for a lot of people. So I think we're kind of, both communities are kind of coming out from that, it seems like. So that's nice. But we managed to survive 2022 together, I guess. Or 2020, 2022, 2023.
I think it was worth like 400 million, right? If I was reading it right, something
Yeah,
around
it
there.
was. Yeah. The whole token was worth. I think it.
At any point in this conversation, if you find value in it, please subscribe. It is hugely beneficial, and it tells Google and everyone out there that this is content worth watching. Thank you for everyone thus far who has commented, liked, subscribed, and told their friends.
I feel like it cracked $1 billion. I can't remember exactly. When we got it, it was our holdings. Yeah, but like our holdings were somewhere around half $1 billion. But again, it's not like you can't access it like that. So it's not like that's really what the fair market value is. Like it's very, very,
it's
very
like it sounds like when people get on Elon Musk's case for being worth a lot of money and they don't realize like it's not liquid, it's not cash.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's not like to sell a SpaceX stock or whatever. I think you can take loans out against it or something like that for like low interest, and that's kind of what you do. I don't know what to do. I'm not a high net worth individual with billions of dollars, so I don't know what you do at that point. But I think from what I read, you just like kind of take loans against it. But I imagine you can't do that with crypto. There's probably not bank confidence in it.
It's definitely one of those where it's a lot. I'd say it's trickier. It's definitely trickier, for sure. And it's very Wild West. There's a lot of stuff that the regulations are a little fuzzy on, and so there's no shortage of folks who will make will make proposals, and you start really kind of feeling icky in your gut about what it is you might be doing, actually supporting. It's like, oh, we'll write you a check for this and that, and you're like, oh, you might be. I don't know exactly who you really are, but even if this is technically legal, I don't feel comfortable doing it. You know what I mean? There's just so it's a strange space to be in. It's great when it enables good things to happen. Like there's a lot of impact investors who are in this space and are doing really, really good things. So I'm not knocking crypto. I think it's fantastic. But it is tricky to navigate, especially when you're kind of especially if you're kind of you're coming from really like the equivalent of like a retail investor, where it's like, or that's your level of familiarity with the space. And then all of a sudden you get a whole lot of it. You're like, whoa, there's a bit of a learning curve, not to just, the technicals of the stuff is something that you can just, read in a day. Obviously you can get a lot deeper than that, but you can understand the broad strokes. But the difference in, kind of the way the difference in the community, or the broader community, not necessarily just the community that we were working with. But yeah, it can get a little tricky, There's a lot of people just
Yeah.
trying to make money, and they don't care at all like what happens to the people that are providing liquidity for them, essentially. So it's a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that amounts like basically like the Michael J. Fox operating budget for their foundation, which they're
Oh.
like I really love that foundation. So like whenever
Okay,
I it's like when I do math, it's usually in a McDonald's worker salary or a McDonald J. Fox Foundation like amounts. It's like you're 1/18th of a Michael J. Fox Foundation. That's my comparison.
Orders of magnitude, right? It's like
yes,
it's a Happy Meal.
It's like
yeah.
It will there's like a football field for acres, right? So it's like it's
right,
my analogies. It's either a Michael J. Fox Foundation or the cost of a Happy Meal times 1,000 or whatever. But it's a lot to come in. It doesn't sound like because you couldn't do anything with it per se for the longest time. It didn't like really really divert you guys too much, which is good. So you could just use it as you could use it to keep doing the great things that you're doing. But you did mention a minute ago that there were things that were specifically funded because of that. So what were some of those projects?
Yeah. So it's a little tricky to talk about because there's it's shifting a little bit, and it's a good problem to have. There are some really, really cool partners that looks like they're coming in to work with us on a kind of one permutation of the thing that we've been working on. But what's the thing that we were working on? We were very interested in using tissue chips, microphysiological systems, and organoids and that sort of stuff to create better human models of aging. That's the short version of it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. One of the so obviously it costs an obscene amount of money and a huge amount of time, and there's a ridiculous failure rate when it comes to drug development. And I think that one of the things that we would hope to have happen once the microphysiological system models are validated, not just for toxicity, which is for toxicity prediction, which is pretty close. Like they're pretty much there, if not already there, depending on who you talk to, but for predicting efficacy. And so, to us, like that's kind of the next thing. If you're able to predict efficacy with these MPSs, then boy, it sure improves the likelihood of a drug actually coming to market. And so when you have economic downturn like we've seen in the last couple of years, in the biotech space, this would serve to reduce the risk profile of that industry as a whole. And so we cared very, very deeply about all the companies that are in the space working to try to solve aging. And when there's an economic downturn, we really, really feel it because we talk to everybody in the space constantly. And we feel that pain. It's really, 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 really hard to keep the lights on and to keep making progress, especially because in geroscience, in biotech, biotech is already very, very risky, but geroscience and regenerative medicine also are seen to be even they're even riskier, and so I think the folks over there, they feel those economic downturns harder than anybody, So our hope is to level the playing field a little bit, kind of if we're able to make an impact in incentivizing and helping to, or incentivizing directed work towards improving microphysiological systems with standards that are representative of where the regulators want to head with those systems, then I think it will hopefully lead to very, very good human models of a variety of different diseases, but human models, particularly of aging, which of course is the thing that has enormous downstream effects and reveals itself as diseases X number of years later. And in having that, then you don't have to rely on animal models, which for a lot of reasons are certainly not ideal. And I think especially with geroscience companies, you find that sometimes is more of an issue. Because they're dealing with stuff that's so far upstream that you go, oh, okay, well, hey, will this work in a mouse? It won't. The biology is different enough where it just simply won't. So you have situations where you have a company with amazing technology and the investors won't give money because you can't. It's like, oh, well, show me the animal data. And they're like, the animal data won't work. There's literally no point whatsoever because our stuff is working on mechanisms that in a mouse are just entirely different than how it is in a human. So So it's a tricky one. So anyway, our feeling is that if there was better human models that didn't actually require a human, then we'd be able to lower the cost and the risk of the entire endeavor. Yeah, and so that's a super long-winded way of kind of describing the premise for this challenge that we've been developing for a little while. So we started out working on a toxicity-related human on a chip challenge, and now it's shifted towards efficacy. And the idea is to use the environment of microgravity in space, or simulated microgravity to create better aging models, human aging models. So as it is right now, tissue chips generally they use induced pluripotent stem cells, and so they're really great at creating youthful tissue, but not so great at making old tissue. And so the hope is to make accelerated aging models with space in the loop, just because there's a lot of reasons why it appears that microgravity is able to create the sufficiently stressful conditions to accelerate the aging of tissues in some respects, other respects not so much. And I think that would be useful both for proving out the value of using microgravity as an environment for doing drug development and validation. But mostly the point is to just simply create better human aging models so that people can do clinical trials before you're doing clinical trials. That in the preclinical phase, you're able to have like a very, very high amount of certainty as to what's going to actually happen in a live, human being.
I was just recently an episode with Osen Matthew Scholes from Osen,
yeah, cool.
and I asked him a similar question because in one of his talks he mentioned that he wanted to he's skipping the monkeys for the clinical trial. So I was asked why.
Yeah.
He was like, our stuff barely worked in mice. It's not going to work in monkeys.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff out there, but you do want you want something in that process, something like organ on chip or these chips. I'm a big fan of the stuff that the Vis is coming out, which I don't know if you have a partner with them,
Sorry?
The Vis out in Boston.
Oh, the Vis,
with,
yeah,
they're great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, they're. I'm trying to like see. I think like Bell Labs is such a beautiful thing in history, like that, just like the engine of innovation.
Yeah.
And so it's just really interesting to see like Methuselah, SENS. I mean, there's a number of them that are just connected to you guys, and then the Vis, like places like that kind of have like little small versions of it coming together that maybe like cumulatively can be like the Bell Labs again.
Oh, that's cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love consortium models. I'm a huge fan of just big old, make a huge party. Just bring in the people who have the right headspace and have the right expertise, and then you can make amazing things happen. I'm really been very happy this last year working with the Biomarkers of Aging consortium, which is definitely doing that. It's pulling together a whole bunch of institutions or PIs from institutions in their labs to help figure out how to actually validate this stuff. So I'm very, very happy about that, and I love that analogy you just gave. That's really, really cool. One of the things that's really, really great about the longevity or geroscience community is that in the modern era and like the early 2000s when it kind of showed up was that it came from a very like impact mindset. So sometimes the ideology of some of it has gotten in the way of adoption, but having a certain amount of ideology at the outset, I think, made for an environment where people felt like they were doing something for the greater good, and so we're probably more collaborative than in some other spaces. So it had very much like a nonprofit sort of ethos. So there's like that was kind of what it was. It's like you had a group of nonprofits who were trying to make an impact, and then they started collaborating with more established research institutions to try to get the research that they felt was going to be useful actually done in a way that was reputable. Because in the early 2000s, I mean, you talk about this sort of stuff, and it was you get laughed out of the room. So it was difficult to get it to the point where it was taken seriously. Scientists were doing the work, but there just weren't a ton of them, and they weren't necessarily convening in a way where it felt like a community. So now thank goodness it's there. There's loads of folks doing it, and everybody knows each other, and they're all trying real hard to get the job done. It's very nice to very gratifying to see, where it's come over the last 20 years.
Mhm. Well, the something I've noticed when things go from being collaborative to being competitive is usually when money and IP is involved. And so
Yep.
this is something I was going to talk about later, but I'm happy to address it now. But how have you guys, it seemingly from the outside, like I don't get to see all the work that you guys do to do this, able to navigate through that the sticky part where like a lot of people, when it comes down to the negotiation aspect of like IP and money or whatever for the support, that usually is where like, I've done like this on the hiring side of it, where like someone will be like, yeah, I'm really excited to work with you, and then you get down to like the numbers, and it's like, wow. Then it all comes out, like the real like brass
Yeah.
tacks of things.
Yeah.
Like I was working, just like a fun story, because I love this guy. I still talk to him. He's a fun person. But we were an early stage startup, and he's like, "Oh, I really love early stage startups. I get that you have to be scrappy, so it's more, you expect more equity than like salary comp." It's like, yeah, so like, but so he went through the whole hiring process, and at the end, he was like, "Yeah, so I'm good with like $500,000." $500,000. It's just like, dude, that's like our whole seed. Like, we get out of here.
Yeah.
It's like and like a third of equity. It's like, okay, well, we're like really far apart. Is that like an anchor point? Is this like a negotiation tactic? Because that's like a really hard anchor.
Yeah.
So I always like it when like it's a fun thing. But yeah, how do you guys navigate that?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that you just, it's just people. So you have to, I don't know, if you have to talk to them for long enough where you try to reduce your likelihood of surprise. For one thing, you try not to work with assholes, and you have to get to know them so that and check your intuition, But in general, I'd say that we've been very, very, very lucky to work with good people. And like I said, a lot of the people in the field, the majority of the people in the field are not motivated, certainly not purely by money. Obviously they have to keep a roof over their head and they care about their careers probably, it's not so bad, but they're not like, it's, psychopathic, mega hyper capitalist sort of people. There's maybe like, one or two in there that you kind of like, be careful with, but in general, like everybody tries to get along and be collaborative. And so it hasn't been too difficult. And I think also, to be fair, the field is small enough, where there's not as much, like there's more room for cooperation than trying to balkanize things. But I don't know. It's a really good question. I think one thing that we're and again, like, I should say this, that like I think on some level we're less exposed to this. We work with a lot of companies, but most of them are not worried about competing with other companies in the space. They're more worried about just literally being able to talk to big pharma or talk to the next group of investors or something. There's not an enormous amount of competition, or there's enough difference between what each company is doing where they have something to offer that's distinct. If it was up to me, like every company in the space would get the funding that they need to, because they can self-organize and they can say, hey, we're going to go down this avenue and we're going to go down this avenue. And yeah, it might have the same overall label or something like that, but they're sufficiently different where you can go and you can create value and you can create impact by going down those different rabbit holes. So there's that. And then again, for us, we're totally impact driven. So for us, we have to keep the lights on, but when we make an investment in a company, the first thing that we look at is if everything goes the way that it's supposed to, and we can support them the way that we'd like to, if we're able to deliver, like we're actually able to help them out. Is this the kind of thing that's going to make like a massive difference? Is this actually gonna make that impact? So for us, it's like sometimes there'll be a company where it looks like a surefire thing financially, but if we don't think it's really going to be deeply impactful, if it's just going to be something to make money off of, like we're not going to do it. It's like it's gotta show that it's going to really make a difference. So we have the advantage of being able to do that. We're not really a VC. We're a foundation. We make a lot of investments, and we did have a few years ago. We had a kind of a small kind of boutique, I guess, fund, which that we put together. And I think the hope for that was, in a lot of ways, is to pull in other angels and kind of expose them to what it looks like to actually, kind of be part of a fund where you actually are, doing diligence on a number of companies and saying, okay, no, this is kind of what a longevity fund actually looks like. There weren't a whole lot in that space. I think if I remember correctly, I think Laura Deming had the first one, which is a few years before the Methuselah Fund. But we had been investing, pretty much through that whole time period as the foundations, proper. So, but I'm not sure if that. I think I got because kind of long-winded and maybe I lost the thread. But
No, I think it's a good overview. It gives me a good like launch off point to ask you like follow-up questions. So like Y Combinator, for instance, on one level, it's like, is there a standardized approach for deals? Like I think for a lot of people when they're doing seed round, they do like a safe because like Y Combinator has kind of pioneered that. And so I'm always curious, like Lisa from SENS, how she negotiates things like IP transfers and stuff like that is like probably I haven't it's like really really smart. It's probably like the coolest thing I learned all last year is like her structure and how she thinks about that. Because usually what I've noticed is like usually it's like people just hand it over and then walk away, which is like in biotechnology. There's Bob Langer, there's George Church, but Bob Langer has this great story where for the longest time he would develop the IP and he handed it off to someone to build, and it would always fail because the person would be like, oh, the first struggle is like, all right, I'm gonna go do something else because they didn't have the have the care. And so and then he started just, all right, well, I'm going to go the full distance with it. And he's probably one of the greatest biotech innovators of our time. And with a great deal of success. I think he owns like 15% of Moderna or something like that. But you should see his office. It's like full of like trophies. He's like plaques from like saving people's lives. But that scope of like taking it the whole way and like kind of shepherding things through and creating structure so you can do that is something I'm very interested in. Like, how do people do that? And especially when they're doing it well, like what you guys do, how do you like shepherd it through? Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, for us, we don't have. So with SENS is a little bit different because they have more. So SENS got started at Methuselah, and we were very happy to work with that program and Aubrey and everybody for the first chunk of time, and then it made an awful lot of sense for a lot of different reasons for the organizations to split or for SENS to be spun out, however you want to put it, because they were focused on being a research institution. So a research institution generates an awful lot of IP. We were more interested in doing challenge development and then being able to do more just like direct investment into different companies. So we haven't had to worry too much about doing tech transfer. But there has been times where the companies that we've worked with do different licensing deals and things like that. But I think that in terms of kind of what you were getting at is, in general, you don't want to just, I mean, unless you're just sick of working on it and would rather have the money than keep working on it, it's way better to keep it as an interest on some level. If you've made something, if you hand it over to somebody, there's a very, very high likelihood that it's just gonna fizzle. Like that happens all the time. So if you really, really care about something, you have to stay. And so, one way to do that is to take a board seat, something like that. Another way is to just simply, keep bugging them. You can just keep emailing them. There's a lot of different things that you can do. But I feel like SENS has done a great job with the spinouts that they've had. So I know like Cyclarity was one of theirs, and Mike Cope and Oki O'Connor, they're absolutely fantastic. And I think they've got to have a good structure for how they handle doing tech transfer.
Yeah. Well, in terms of challenges, which are always fun, how do you know? I guess it's probably like a math thing, right? Like if you have like $1,000 and you probably only can give out like a certain amount for a certain amount of people. But I'm always curious in that the analogy of like turtles, right? Like you have to like lay so many eggs of turtles for them to get down to the beach to potentially be successful, and to grow up to be an adult to make more turtles essentially. So like, how do you what does actually go into like structuring a prize or a challenge so that you can have like actual good things come from it? Because there's a lot of times where you'll hear about a challenge being administered, right? Like someone saying there's like $250 million to do this or whatever. You never really hear about it again. Like what's happening there?
Yeah, well, they set the prize pot like way, way, way too high, and probably didn't have an ecosystem that was established enough to do any of it. So I mean, there for challenge development, I always forget the guy's name, and it's really a shame that I can't remember off the top of my head. It's a really important thing that he did, but came up with he was at NASA, and he came up with the 4 Gs to help you, kind of a little bit of a mimetic for what it is that makes up a challenge or properly incentivizes a challenge. And it's gold, not surprisingly. It's guts, and it's got to be kind of hard, like it's got to be sufficiently challenging, like it's an actual challenge. It's glory, obviously. It's the PR that you get from it. Gold, guts, glory, and good. Yes, and it's got to be has to have some sort of impact. It's got to be something that's not evil. It's got to be like a good thing to do. All of those, depending on what kind of challenge you want, you can change the levels of which one feels the most important.
Mhm.
And really, it's just you have to have like some sort of minimal threshold for all of them. Good is probably like the easiest because you can kind of intuit what's a good thing and what isn't, especially if you have a charity that's putting it out versus say a for-profit company that has just like, hey, here's a challenge, we want you to solve a problem for us. It's really more of like a bounty. But especially for grand challenges, the good part is usually pretty easy to figure out. If you're doing a grand challenge, the glory is usually pretty easy because you find the right partners to do it with, so who have good enough PR engines. There's strong, reputable institutions that can really do a good job of publicly recognizing the folks who are participating. The gold is something that usually follows a challenge that's actually hard enough and interesting enough. So if you find something that is like a real, hole, a real problem, a real often it's like a rate limiter, it's something that says, hey, like you've got a lot of people in this space who are kind of doing a lot of different things. I mean, actually, this is sometimes like the best way for a challenge to get done is if you have an awful lot of people who are in a space who are aligned on the big picture of what they're trying to do. And if you can, usually just by talking to them an awful lot, figure out what the key rate limiters are, and then organize a challenge around one of those, then it helps to just simply focus attention. Challenges are really a way of focusing attention more specifically than say like a grant program. Usually grant programs have something sort of broad, but they don't have to have specific criteria cooked into them, where it's like we've defined the problem, so we've defined it sufficiently where it can be used to actually literally down select if we need to. So that's kind of the difference. Is that challenges are an awful lot like grant programs. They're just extremely specific, extremely specific. So if you can find a rate limiter that if it's a problem that can be solved, will raise all boats and have a strong multiplying effect in terms of the folks who are in the community and the effort that they have to make is now you've basically removed a huge barrier for them. That's usually the kind of thing that you want to try to aim at if you're doing something that's a proper inducement challenge. If it's something, there's a lot of other challenges that they're much lower risk for competitors, and for those, it's usually not such a problem for it to be something that's iterative. So it's like for data science challenges, it's often like that, where you provide them the tool set, you provide them a data set, you say, hey, we're trying to solve this problem or improve, this metric, and then you sick a community on it, and then you can move that number and improve the efficiency or the accuracy or whatever it is that you're looking for in a certain thing. So like we're doing a data science challenge right now on aging, on biomarkers of aging. And that's one that's, it's pretty low risk for people to participate in. All they have to do is show up with a computer and some expertise, and they can work on it. It's very different though than a hardware or a wetware sort of challenge where to even participate probably costs you $1 million. Or it's some sort of significant figure. You have to be embedded in a very, very well-funded institution, or you have to come with an awful lot of private funding. So for those, it's much harder and to get it all organized. And a lot of times when you're organizing a challenge like that, the initial premise that you start with, because they tend to take a little while to develop, the initial premise that you start with will oftentimes like shift over the course of development. It's a little bit like doing a startup where you're having to pivot a bunch of times, but it just hopefully costs you a lot less money because it's really just like a kind of a small kind of think tank, which is developing the thing, trying to get everything in place. But if it turns out that the research, like in the course of developing it, somebody else solves the problem, well, you go, well, shoot, we're all kind of sitting around. We need to do something that's going to take what now just got done and then make a new challenge, or figure out what the new challenge actually is. So it's kind of funny. That's what's been happening with the last challenge that we did, and it's happened before. It's like so many instances. If you look at like especially the modern history of challenge development, where a challenge will get launched, and then it sometimes will get canceled either because the criteria was set wrong, or because there weren't enough teams and the problem didn't really get solved. Like it's difficult, but when it works, my God, I don't know if there is a better economic mechanism for making progress. If you define the criteria right and you get the people to show up, like it's kind of ridiculous how good challenges can be in terms of the multiplying effect. It's kind of insane.
For finding rate limiters, is there? Well, I'm gonna keep referencing the Osen interview I just put up this week because his method was really funny. But what he would do is he would tell people his ideas and then wait for them to tell him he's wrong. He's like, all right, great, that's where my thing is. Yeah,
that's a great one, actually.
Yeah.
So sorry, what was the question?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. How do you find rate limiters? Like, how do you because to some extent they're kind of like black swans, which are kind of like you can't really find them on purpose. I guess
you do it by, I mean, it's a combination of reading literature, and just doing, reading literature, doing research, trying to create a mind map, talk to your friends about it, and say like, hey, is this a problem where if we could figure this out, then a whole bunch of stuff would be unlocked, So it's that kind of stuff, but mostly it's literally just doing community. I mean, call it community outreach, but it's just talking to people. They'll tell you what their problems are.
Yeah.
You go up to a group of people in a long enough timeline, it will turn into, what are all of our problems? We're like social creatures, and we like to tell each other about our problems so that we can band together to figure out how to fix them. And so if you hang out with enough people, you'll figure out what everybody's problems are. And you can usually figure out what a rate limiter is if you just know what everybody's problems are. But yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really simple. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there are more sophisticated ways of doing it, but
it works.
But I'm lucky enough to just be in a community and I can just talk to people, and that's usually is the fastest way. And it's also, it's of course, I'm biased to that because I don't have to do challenge design and management across like a gazillion domains. I'm focused on something that I already know well enough. Especially the community who's going to be probably participating in one way or the other, so I can do that. If I was an organization where if I was making just challenges for everything under the sun, that's a lot harder. You have to get everybody, and I think XPRIZE does a good job of this in terms of organizing, larger events where they pull in subject matter experts from a lot of different places. They'll do big events and they'll do smaller ones too, to help develop challenges. But I'm lucky. I just have the advantage of being able to just go to the community and just talk to people, and then you can, figure out what the problems are,
Yeah. A question I usually ask in the background of my head when I'm talking to someone is like essentially what their superpower is. What can they do, or what do they know that other people do not know? And it seems like if I were to guess yours, usually I don't. This is like not something I say in the interview. It's just like something I write down for fun for myself.
Right.
It sounds like yours would be empathy.
Oh, that's sweet. Thanks.
Yeah. To listen. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Keep praising me. No, I'm just kidding. No,
go it's supposed to be the other way. It's supposed to be the other way. I'm supposed to remind you that you're just a man, right? Like you're good at something, I'm supposed to like whisper, you're just a man, just like Caesar. Like they had those people, so you wouldn't get too egotistical. But yeah, no. In terms of radical empathy, the ability to listen to people's problems and then synthesize it down into something that can be then made better, like that is a very difficult set of skills.
Oh, well, yeah. I appreciate it, and I think, yeah, gosh, boy, I don't know how to talk about this exactly. I grew up in a very tight-knit community, but it was also kind of a complicated community to navigate, and so it's very, I don't know, because it's tough to get into. It's a very, very long conversation. But you definitely, that was an environment in which you had to learn empathy. Like you really had to learn people, and so I don't know, I've found that you get an awful lot more done, and people are a lot and people enjoy doing it if they're happy. You have to do stuff with human beings. And so if people are enjoying themselves and feel like they're doing stuff that means something, and they're doing it with people that they feel or they can enjoy the company of, and they feel like they're making a difference in their life, like that's kind of what life is about. It doesn't happen in it doesn't happen in isolation. You can get so much more done if you can get a good team together of people who genuinely care about the goal, but also care about each other. If you care about each other, then that keeps that going. Like you were talking earlier about when you have a thing and then you kind of hand it off to someone and it usually fizzles. Like it's because you left the room. If you had stayed there and kept that relationship going, it might have gone completely different. But when you leave things, and you don't leave the thing, you leave the person who is now who now holds it. It's like abandoning your baby, So sometimes there's a good reason to do that. but most of the time it's like, oh, that's probably what's going to happen. So I think, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's I appreciate working with empathetic people too. It helps out quite a lot. Yeah. It's really is just kind of keeping track of what people want, what makes people feel good. And then it's amazing. Absolutely amazing what can happen if you can get that kind of, if you can get alignment. If you can figure out what you can do to help somebody and they can help you with, if it's for a good cause, if it's for a good reason, then yeah, if you just try to keep that engine running. It's like an innovation engine, but with like happy fuzzy feelings at the same time.
Yeah, I often remark this, that the evilest thing you can do is just to treat people well. If you that's the, like if you're like an evil person who wanted to make the most money and do well in life,
yeah.
Right? Just be nice to people. Like it's true. If you think, hey, what's getting in the way of this employee who seems to keep like falling behind? Like what's going on with that? Versus coming in like, why are you always behind? Like attacking them. You're not gonna get an answer to that. You're not gonna get an answer to that.
No, it's true. It's totally, and it's so strange because there's been I've had conversations with people where if maybe they had like kind of a maybe they had a bad day or they had a rough childhood or they're rough and they might be someone who like struggles with maintaining a kind of emotional equilibrium. But when they get into a state where they are agitated, sometimes like I've got someone who they tell me like, what, if it happens again, just please hug me. And I'm like, man, I got to think about that, because the last thing you want to do in that moment is to go hug them because they feel dangerous to you. It's like, actually, you're scaring me. I kind of want to leave the room. But it's so counterintuitive, but it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, yeah, if you're able to kind of look past the the manifestation of whatever those things are, the manifestation of those negative feelings, you solve them not by fighting back. You solve them by solving those negative feelings, which is sometimes just giving somebody a hug. Kind of different, but man, it is yeah. So if you want to be an evil dictator, you just figure out how to do how to do hugging at scale, and then everyone will just get along. Will just do whatever it is, whatever horrible thing that you want, and then they'll get hugged.
Well, it is interesting because a lot of people see like the Steve Jobs, right, that yell at people, and I don't even think like Walter Isaacson, like only Steve could do that, because there's like a lot of he had like so many different things like counteracting that deficit of a treatment to people.
Yeah, totally. He absolutely did. He was like the mean dictator, and then he had a bunch of like nice people go and be like, "It's okay, honey. Like don't. That's just Steve. Let's go aside and let's figure out how to solve the problem and all that." So Steve is like he's a force of nature, and then he's got a whole bunch of like nice people in the village to help people figure out how to deal with the fact that their kid just got struck by lightning. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting to me how often people like just don't put their feet in other people's shoes. Like if they're having a conflict, like if someone's yelling at me, and this happens every now and again, people like sometimes yell at me. I'll just be like really calm. Be like, so what's this person trying to tell me right now?
Yeah.
It's like, all right. So like, I don't say it because like that pissed them off. So what are you trying to say to me? But I just think it's like, what is this? What's really going on? Like, what stubbed this person's toe today? Where now I'm getting this negative manifestation of their personality, and then usually like a minute later they calm down anyway. So, but if it's like I think of it like babies, or like this is like not in a mean way, but like
Right,
if a
yeah.
baby's crying, like if you start crying too, like doesn't really help the baby. So like if you like listen to like why it's crying, and you feed it or whatever, then it's like it's happy and it giggles, and that's kind of nice, you know.
Yeah.
But like if the
Yeah.
baby's crying, you just yell at it like, "Why are you crying?
Why are you crying?
crying?" That's
Stop
more serious. You
crying.
shouldn't do that.
Stop
You
crying.
shouldn't do that. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of like I don't know. There's a sufficient number of people, both and I think everyone's a leader in different ways, but like that will just yell. If someone's yelling, they'll yell back, which is I think it's fine. Like if someone's trying to stab you, it's fine to yell at them. Like asking like why are you trying to stab me is probably like not the time to ask that question. It's like what is the motivation behind stabbing me?
Yeah. Wait,
You
hold
know,
on. I just want to ask you about your feelings. Why
yeah.
are you stabbing me? You know, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
a good reason.
Yeah, unless you're trained like Iroh from like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then you can like diffuse the situation, like help them with life, which would be kind of nice. But
Right. Yeah.
it is just like how it is interesting how often it's such a protective mechanism to not care about other people, but it's like the thing that keeps them most from achieving whatever they wanted to do in life.
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a tough balance to strike for sure.
Yeah.
But I do know that like when you're lucky enough to find good people, man, like it's such a precious thing. Like you got to figure out you can't let it go.
Yeah. And to some extent, you can't even teach it. Like there's some people where like you can kind of massage it out, with good examples and stuff. There's some people that's like I was working with this one guy or girl, who like in every he would just be they would be a jerk to everyone. It's like like you're having pride victories. Like sure you're minutely right in what you were saying, but that person is not gonna do their best with how you just spoke to them or like how you try to convince them. It's kind of like once again I grew up on a farm, so like I use animal analogies. Like try to drag a 2-ton animal and make it drink water. It ain't gonna do it. Like it is not going to do it. But if you put like food in its, near its mouth, and you like kind of encourage it, like it'll do what it wants to do on its own. I think that's like what you said earlier about alignment. Like that's what a lot of leadership is. It's like listening and finding what people want to go, and then kind of just like helping them get there. Which I guess is kind of like more philosophy and like, but it is just surprising me how often people don't do that.
Everything's a lot easier if you try to do that. You can't do. There's a lot of times you wish you could do more, but yeah, you just find good people and something that you can do together, and then do everything that you can to keep to help the person do what it is they need to do. So it's just not always easy. God, if you could just have everything just like align quickly, but it takes a lot of work sometimes to create the right environment where that where that can keep going. Like you can get that set up, but keeping it going, keeping all those relationships going so that they're not just fun but they're productive. It's a little bit of a challenge. And there's been times too where I think it was like last month it was right after our symposium. I was so tired and I was like starting to get sick, and I started feeling like I was like kind of like losing patience with people, and I was like, man, I need to just chill out. And I'm like, I just like slept for like 3 days straight. And I was like, my body had reached the point where it was not capable of really doing anything. I was like, I need to take myself out of this like game just for a few days, for the love of God, just chill out, so I got sick. I got sick enough so that I could just relax and get some rest.
There's one way to get vacation days. If you're sick, you can call in.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
But actually, just like a quick check-in on that. What would you say is that? Is it empathy, or is it the creating the conditions, or some third thing that you think that you're not like better than other people, but like that you think like you're like?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty good at thinking holistically. I'm definitely not so much of a laser focus kind of person. I'm much more drink from a fire hose and then find interconnected bits and pieces that look interesting. Be like, oh, that over there relates to all this and all this and this. Oh, cool. So I like to try to, it's not like it's something that I necessarily do intentionally, but like just building kind of internal information hierarchies is something that's very, very helpful for creating conditions for opportunity and spotting opportunity when it shows up. A lot of this stuff showing up is just by continually talking to people. and talking to the people that they know, and just expanding, a network of smart and, good-hearted people. And then if you have decent enough kind of mental models of how the stuff connects, and you can understand how it might be that stuff connects from their perspective, then it can be very, very easy for things to kind of just naturally kind of emerge from the combination of paying attention to how the world works, but in particular paying attention to how the world works through the lenses of the people that are in your network. The people that they'll tell you what's going on, and then so it's kind of funny. You got to keep like the mental model from what you feel like is an objective mental model, and then you got to kind of try to keep other people's mental models in your head at the same time, to see how they overlap, and what discordancies might actually be there, so you can figure out how to tweak them or do what you need to. But so I don't know. I also play guitar, but that's which is fun. But I don't know. So I'm not sure. It's hard for me to talk about myself. I have no idea.
Yeah, we'll stop talking about yourself then. There's a fan question right in, and we'll move on to Methuselah again. All right, so Town Grizzletown. This person shows up a lot.
Town Grizzletown?
Yeah, Town Grizzletown. I don't think that's their full legal name. But
okay, not too bad. Hey, what's
they
up?
have two. Yeah, hey Town. But they have two related questions. Are there any notable startups that the Methuselah Foundation has sponsored recently that you're excited about? And I basically merged that into one, or research that you're excited about that you funded.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so goodness gracious, that's a cool one. There's a lot of and there's honestly like so much good research that's going on in this space. So there's it's not just the companies that Methuselah has a stake in. There's a lot of like really wonderful stuff. But I'll say really, really quickly. Of course, we're a huge fan of Turn Bio. I'm sure that they don't need like a huge introduction. They're fantastic and have made a lot of progress over the years. They're doing really, really good work. And they do like partial epigenetic reprogramming and can address I think, I don't know, 7 of the hallmarks of aging. That's very, very, very good stuff. And let's see. I'm a big fan of Nanotics. We invested in them earlier this year. They're very, very, very cool. You should have Lou on. He is amazing. So what they do is they do immune pheresis, and it's basically and I'm going to butcher this, but it's basically like you have nanoscale silica spheres which have antibodies on the outside, and they can go in and deplete the signaling molecules or deplete the signaling proteins that are kind of floating around. So when you have chronic inflammation, or you have sepsis, you have cytokine storms, right? And it's just your immune system in a state of complete freak out and sending a whole bunch of what I like. My analogy for it is it's like a spam filter. So except for, imagine if like in the 90s when you got thousands of erectile dysfunction emails every day, but there was no like spam filter, or like send me $1,000 and I'll send you whatever. But you were not sophisticated enough to realize that those were not real messages, and you had to respond to every single one of them and do exactly what they told you to. So that's to me, the immune system is a little bit like that, where you have all of these signals that are going out there, and the immune system is just going like, you got it, I'll do what you tell me to, and it ends up protecting zombie cells and protecting tumors and doing all the things that it's not supposed to do. And so what this is able to do is, it's without actually putting anything into the cells themselves. It doesn't do anything on the surface of the cells. It actually just goes through and it floats around and depletes the improper signaling. And so it is very, very, very well tolerated, and it's very, very good at ablating tumors without any impact on the immune system itself. It's kind of ridiculous. So they just had good results. I think it was published. Well, I'm afraid I can't remember if it was to what extent it was publicly published, but they just had some very, 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 very good results out of the Mayo Clinic in humanized mice models. So anyway, very, very excited about that one. We also invested in Mitrix Bio fairly recently. I think it was about a year ago, maybe at this point. And they do a mitochondrial bioreactor for mitochondrial transplants, which is very, very interesting. So I think that one is very, very cool. Let's see who else. Xtherma. Are you familiar with them by any chance?
The Matrix bio, I didn't know them either. There's a bunch of them that you're saying that I didn't know.
Oh yeah, it's confusing. So Mitrix, and then there's Matrix Bio. Matrix Bio, I think, just was it's either a spin out or was just recently invested in by VitaDAO. So they're different, but there's Mitrix, and then there's Matrix. So the one that we
Okay.
that we work with
That was
is-
my handwriting. That was the
Yeah,
failure
no,
there in
no.
my handwriting.
It confuses me too. I always want to say Matrix, and it's actually Mitrix for like mitochondria, Mitrix. Xtherm is cool. They came, I shouldn't say they came out of it, but they were part of this group of folks that we were working with a few years back. So I'll give you a longer story. Something that's happened a few times, and the first time it happened with SENS, where we had kind of an internal program which made sense to spin out, or we started working with a group of people that very easily could incorporate and become an independent organization, but we kind of work with them to get them on their feet, And so we started working with this group, which became the Organ Preservation Alliance.
Mhm.
So it's about obviously preserving organs, but generally cryopreserving organs. And so this was like, I want to say it was back in like 2012, 2013. 2013, let's call it 2013, when we started working with them, and then we did a lot of fun stuff together with them for a few years. We ended up doing like a big White House summit with them, and a lot of funding got released to different institutions, and a couple of institutions were actually formed out of the effort that that we were helping them with, but that they were leading. And so a lot of funding was released to for folks working in cryopreservation of organs. And one of the couple of the scientists who are working in that space formed Xtherma, and they're able to keep organs alive for I think 3 times longer than they normally would, which is kind of insane when you think about how that would change the current paradigm of organ waiting lists and things like that. If when their technology is ready to go, at scale. So they've got the technology. I think it's probably just I wish they were here to correct me if I'm misrepresenting it all, but I think it's just a matter of getting the funding so that they can continue to scale what they're doing. But it seems to me like it completely would change the way that the current system of organ transplantation waiting lists and all that works. So. So they're very, very cool. There's a lot. If you probably have you met Reason before? Do you know Reason?
Reason? I
Yeah,
don't think so.
he's cool. He's got one name. Yeah.
It's like Cher.
Yeah. What?
Like Cher. I think there's like musicians.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
one name.
Just like Cher or Prince. Like he's Reason. He's literally the embodiment of reason itself. But he's got Repair Bio. They're working on NASH and atherosclerosis. Known him for a super long time. Amazing guy, and great company. And there's Leucadia Therapeutics. They're very cool. They have a this is an interesting one because it's more of a medical device. So they hopefully will be able to get where they need to faster.
Is it Doug Ethel?
Yeah. Okay, you know him?
Yeah, he's on the show. People keep commenting
cool.
To have him back on because his clinical trial results have not been posted online, and they want him to come on and say what the results were.
Cool. Well, you should have him do it. It's great. It's a great company. You should have him back on. Trying to think. There's a ton of them. We have a good relationship. We worked with Organovo off and on for years now. They were kind of the first. I think they were the first 3D tissue printing company. And so we invested in them quite a while ago, and then they have kind of a sister company called Viscient, which is they do assays, I believe, for drug discovery, for drug development. But yeah, there's a lot of really great companies in this space. I'm a huge fan. We haven't invested in them, even though I'd like to. Gero is very, very cool. I think Peter Fedochev and company have a very, very interesting perspective in terms of like further maybe better arguably better. I'm not sure if it's better, but it's an interesting way of kind of segmenting the difference between, what they call like true aging versus something that is more like frailty. So it's one of which they think may not really be able to be reversed, but you can halt it, which is still pretty great. It's there's a lot of great folks in the space. I met a company in Riyadh a few weeks ago at the Evolution conference, called, I think it's Linkgevity, that is doing appears to have a very, very interesting way of treating necrosis, tissue necrosis, which has a lot of applications. But I think in particular, like the most obvious thing when you think about its relationship to aging is people who develop necrosis in their hips, for example, and then they end up breaking their hip. It's a huge cause of mortality for sure, but there's also a lot that can be done, of course, maybe in conjunction with some of the cryopreservation companies that are out there, to extend the shelf life of organs. Which, if you can have a good organ banking system, that's like a game changer for a lot of reasons. And there's certainly more people now in the kind of the like longevity community who are keen on replacement methodologies, which for a while was kind of like considered by some people anyway, kind of like fake, not real geroscience, not real longevity, just swapping out tissues. But if you can get there, it's like it works pretty great, so.
Yeah, I remembered to pull this up. Steve Rader is the 4Gs guy from earlier. I wanted to close this tab. I googled this earlier because you didn't know his name. I just want to make sure anyone listening in now has this information. Steve Rader.
Okay.
Yes, and then the second thing is, what are you familiar with, like Michael Levin's work? Michael Levin.
On bioelectricity.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I'm not super familiar.
Regeneration.
All I really know is Michael Levin does bioelectricity, and I don't know deeply about it. So please.
Yeah. Well, his big thing is regeneration, essentially, and actually, I think you'd love his work. He was on the show. You don't need to watch that, so you can go read his stuff if you like the paperwork. He's very open too about like the same structure that you like to do things. But anyway, so he's working right now and translating. He's doing that thing where he's not handing off and he's following it through, where he's working on regenerating a mouse's hand, essentially, like regenerating limbs. So they found different ways to like grow organs in different spots. Eyes on the back of a frog, and they actually can see from the eye and stuff like that. Like these crazy things. And so he's working on that. But in terms of regeneration, I'm always very curious. Like we have preserving organs, but then at the same time, like to what extent you just regenerate or heal an organ. I think I was reading like a couple years ago. There's a way to like take a heart. They're working on a way to take a heart out and kind of like rip out the bad parts and like kind of swap in, hot swap it in like a race car and put it back in. Stuff like that. So I'm always very curious about people's thoughts on regenerative science. If you don't know him, so I can't ask you about your thoughts on him specifically, but like the idea of that type of stuff.
Oh, the idea of it? I think the idea of it is, I think it's great. To me, it feels like a much more, in some ways, I guess, well, I don't know how to put it exactly, because I don't want to make it sound like it's better or worse or whatever, but it certainly seems like a perfectly viable way of approaching things. And there's lots of good work being done in the space, in terms of, either replacing tissue that you have or, applying something that allows it to regenerate. There's a ton of work that's being done in space. So there's there's like, whether you go like, okay, put a molecule in and see what happens, or it's fully like, yes, let's grow you a chunk of tissue and transplant it. Or like, I think one that's interesting, God, I wish I could remember right now, but there was I think it was pretty recent, but like when you take a piece of young tissue, it's a little bit like it's a little bit like parabiosis, where you take, right? But where you take a piece of a young chunk of a liver or whatever it is, and then you put it into aged tissue, and it seems like it does a really, really great job of not getting old like the other stuff, but improving basically de-aging the rest of the organ. So that's great. If we can have more of that go on, I'm certainly in favor of it.
Yeah. I think Michael Levin's, it's he basically induces the body to heal itself. That's kind of what it does. Yeah, it's really cool. I don't know. If you read it and you don't like it, you can let me know.
No, it's good. I know what I'm going to do tonight when I need a little
Yes.
bit of light reading or a little
Yeah.
bit of light listening.
Yeah.
I'll be oh,
Well, his was like one of the funnest answers last year, where I asked him like, why is it that cancers are immortal but cells aren't? He's like, you got that backwards. Why aren't all cells immortal? It's actually he has some really cool theories about why basically cells keep other cells in line. But
yeah.
you mentioned necrosis a second ago. Another application of this, and I was recently reading about this, is they put there's drug addicts that use it's not morphine but a sedative of some kind, and it gets under the skin and it causes necrosis, and it basically, like, because they're on the street and stuff like that, and it's really expensive, they can't get it treated, so eventually they just lose the limb and other horrible things. But it sounds like a really awesome application there as well, outside of aging. Just keep people alive. There's tens of thousands of people on the streets who are having literally, like, it is pretty messed up in terms of necrosis, like eating through their body. And so it sounds like maybe that could be another application if they're listening in. Look at that as a place for it.
Yeah.
But you are in quite a lot of things, and I know one of the things we wanted to touch on today is, and I can't find in my notes. It's there you go, deep space food travel.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You can establish it. I was just going to jump in, and I have this problem. Whoever makes this comment, like, Lowell, why don't you let them establish the premise before just like diving in?
No, it's fine.
But yeah. So what is, like, Bob Barker or whatever it is? What is space food travel?
So the current paradigm of eating food in space is these lovely shelf stable sorts of meals, which are freeze dried and reconstituted, and all the stuff that you kind of might expect if you've been to like the Air and Space Museum, and everyone knows a little bit about space food. But that doesn't work so great when you're talking about long duration missions. So that paradigm is like okay when you're getting relatively frequent resupply. But if you're talking, a mission to Mars or establishing a base on the moon or something along those lines, resupply becomes like a real problem. You can't really do it. It's wildly expensive, and if something goes sideways, then you've got a Matt Damon situation, and that's not so great. So they back in 2020, let's say it was 2020, they started NASA Centennial Challenges. I think it was Manzi Rahman and Robin Gatens, who is the head of the ISS, and Angela Herblay and some other fine folks started working to develop a challenge around sustainable food systems for deep space missions, as a way to try to move away from the kind of shelf stable food paradigm to something that's excuse me, whoa, that's more sustainable. So we're now in the third phase of the challenge. So it started in 2021, which the first phase was kind of a design exercise. So a whole bunch of companies and researchers, wrote basically a very, very thorough proposal with, video demonstrations and everything of the food systems that they were designing or wanted to design. And then the second phase was them actually going and building it and producing food with it, that was both safe and palatable, something you should actually want to eat. And then now we are in the third phase. Is kind of, it kicked off a few months ago, but it's honestly like kind of right now starting in earnest. And the what we're going to do is we're going to have the winning teams go to Ohio State University and set up shop there, bring their technology, and have student simunauts, which is a way of kind of saying analog astronaut, but it's not like a full analog astronaut. Like, they don't have to live in the room, they don't have to do the whole thing, but they have to operate the food production technology, produce food with it. And again, of course, the food's got to be safe. It's got to, it's got certain targets on the hedonic scale for palatability, acceptability. And the technology itself also has to be acceptable in the sense that it has a good user experience. There are targets for how much time a crew actually spends assembling meals and caring for the equipment and that sort of thing. And so, we thought it made sense. And this is one of the guys on the team, Bruce Link. He's really amazing. He came up with the term Simunaut, and I think the general idea of like, hey, let's actually get students to independently operate these technology to ensure that it's capable of being operated by not total experts in food production. Like you kind of want to be able to take it off the shelf, look at an operations manual and say, okay, cool, I can do this. Look at me. Now I'm turning CO2 into protein, by pressing the buttons in the right series, Um, and so yeah, they're the teams that are now part of it they're really amazing. There's 5 US teams, and then there are 3 international teams at this stage. So there's Air Company out of Brooklyn. So they do a CO2 to protein process. They also make jet fuel. They also make perfume. They also make vodka, And then there's Nolux, which is no lux as in like no light. So they have this artificial photosynthesis process. It's very cool. There's Interstellar Lab, which they have, it's like a very, very sophisticated sort of grow technology, but it's like very modular. So they have all these like kind of small pods, which are kind of, you can swap them out and then grow different things in a kind of circular ecosystem. Where the waste product from one section feeds into, the other and that sort of thing. So it's very, very efficient. There's Sated, which has a very cool like centrifuge sort of appliance, but it's so it'll work nicely in microgravity, and it's cool because the one thing, it doesn't produce food on its own, so it would presume that you'd be bringing a significant amount of food along with it, but it does give you an awful lot of variety in terms of preparation, which is really quite nice. So it's, in many ways, it's a very you have a lot of flexibility as a crew member to eat what you want, and formulate it how you'd like, which is nice. And then let's see, I'm forgetting the 5th one, which I'm kicking myself now. Why am I forgetting? Oh yes, yeah, and Colonel Deltec, yeah, that one's really, really cool as well. That's that's using like fungi, but it's like I forget honestly exactly the gosh, it's a very interesting one. I know it uses fungus in the loop, and then you end up with a powder that you can then turn into like a high protein powder that you can then formulate into all sorts of alternative meats and different things. It's extremely flexible. They make a very, very good cheese sort of analog. They make like very, very, very good pseudo chicken and that sort of thing. Like I've eaten their food. It's delicious. It's very, very good. It's become, I think my coffee's running out in my brain, and so I'm kind of drawing some blanks. I apologize. I'm like, what am I?
No, you're doing a great job. Paul Shapiro does he uses Rhiza for his cellular agriculture alt protein stuff. It's very exciting
cool
stuff. Yeah, fungi.
Okay, very cool. Yeah. And then there's, so on the international side, there's also another company called Mycorrhiza, which is somewhat similar. They also use fungi. And then there's Solar Food, which is really, really cool. It's another sort of, use CO2 to create protein. They have their product is called Soline, and they're actually already, I believe, in grocery stores in Singapore. They make a lot of different good foods with it. Yogurt, cheese, all sorts of good stuff. Pasta, I know they make a pasta, which is very, very cool. And then Enigma of the Cosmos, which wins the award for best team name. But it's Gaia out of Australia, and Australia does a lot of interesting things with space food, particularly with plants. So they have there's a kind of a center of excellence that's now down there called Plants in Space, and you can imagine what they're working on. But it's very, very cool. They're able to do like remote gene expression. Not this team in particular, but it's something that I'm sure they could do if they wanted to. But they're able to kind of I kind of thinking about it almost like upgrading the firmware of a plant in order to get it to produce something different. So from the perspective of of not just providing nutrients, but also potentially providing some sort of medical intervention. I love the idea of being able to, at some point, get a plant to, make a drug for you. If you find out that there's something hinky going on somewhere and you can't send them drugs in time, if you could somehow turn the plants that they already have into something that could produce the pharmaceuticals that they need, it's pretty wild.
Mhm.
The
Is there not qualifications like one of the constraints like the bioavailability of the food itself, or is it just the ability to make the food as one of the criteria you look at? The bioavailability is bioavailability a component of what you are sifting for in the competition?
I'm sorry, when you say bioavailability of the food, what do you mean?
Yeah, bioabsorption. Sorry, like your ability to absorb the protein in the substance. Thank you so much for like pushing it. It's just.
Oh no,
Yeah,
it's okay. I thought that's what you meant, but I just wanted to make sure. No, I don't think it's something that we're super concerned about. Actually, we are concerned more about the macronutrients of the foods themselves, and then which micronutrients they have the capacity to provide. So there are some that are more important in space, and that so we'd be more interested in those. I think it's C, D, and K, and I think there might be a couple of those that I'm forgetting right now, but that are particularly important. But the biggest thing is really just it's adhering to kind of what the nutritional targets are for the astronauts. So it's definitely like more protein. Protein is good. Lots of sugars, not so good. Lots of salt, not so good.
But is your marker like inputs? So if they're saying like, hey, you need like 20 grams of protein a day, is it just like can you provide using their systems 20 grams of protein a day?
Yeah, so we have to measure against the targets, right? So we don't expect that the teams are going to necessarily provide for all of it, but we want to see that they are able to provide a meaningful portion of it, and it's part of a function of the overall efficiency of the system itself. So if they have to bring a whole bunch of extra stuff with them, versus you bring a little bit in and it recycles very, very effectively, it's very different. So especially if it's able to utilize the just what's in the capsule, or not in the capsule, but what's actually in the air itself. So if you're able to use the actual, use CO2, that doesn't count against you when it comes to the inputs and outputs equation, because you're just literally using, the outputs from the eclipse system. And it's like, okay, well, they're breathing, great. And so that's it's really more of like how efficient is the system and what kind of nutritional profile are they able to, and again, of palatable food, stuff that you actually want to eat. There's a function of how if it's safe, then it's kind of like it's safe or it isn't. Then it's how much nutrition can it provide for as a proportion of the meals for a crew of 4 for X period of time. How palatable is it? How easy is the system itself able to operate? Does it have a good user experience, and how much time does it take to operate? And then it's how big is it? How much does it weigh? Stuff like that. Yeah. Although at this stage we're not worried about that too much in terms of the actual technology itself, because we're expecting that if it were to actually be used on mission, it would have to be redesigned, obviously, by folks. But when we set the initial in phase 1, we had targets that were pretty aggressive in terms of the actual size of the food system itself. So most of the teams have kind of followed with that those like kind of rough soft constraints. So it's all kind of like working itself out.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because I think maybe absorption could have been a criterion, because a lot of alternate protein, the absorption rates are actually really low. So you could eat like a sandwich made with all protein, risa, any of these different things, and you could use like a hamburger, and you would get like 100% from the hamburger, and you get like 30% from like these other things. So, but I guess if you just eat it like 3 times more, it would be the same thing. So you could just scale it up to solve that problem.
I don't know. It's actually a really, really good point that you raise. So I don't know, but it would be worthwhile to dig into. I think you're there. I wish I had like one of the nutritional experts with me right now, because then they'd be like, yeah, here's exactly what I think about that.
We already thought of this. Yeah.
So
It's probably been thought about. Yeah.
No, it's
Um,
it's a really, really great point.
yeah. If I'm saying this wrong, the nice thing I was gonna comment on this earlier. If you say something wrong, I think it's called like Murphy's Law or something. It doesn't even matter if I say this right. If you say it wrong, someone in the comment section will correct you. So I
Oh
never like
yes,
feel the need
I'm
to be all
sure.
that accurate.
Oh, I'm
I do my
sure.
best, and if I like say the wrong thing, someone's gonna correct me, which is nice.
That's good. Hey,
And then
anybody who's listening, this is a team effort. Let's fix
yes,
it. I've said
yes,
99% of these things incorrect, so feel free to tell me how.
yes. Find that 1% and you get a cookie. Homemade cookie. If we see each other at a conference.
We
The
will.
one other thing is there's it sounded like cooking time was an efficiency based criterion. But the hearth and like the culture aspect of making food is also
Yep.
really quite large.
Yeah.
Is there an element to there of like, sure, you can make it fast, but maybe
Yeah.
like there's something in like compiling it that like you get like a bonus for?
Yeah, that's a really good thing. I think that factors into the user experience piece of it.
Mm,
So it's like, do you enjoy doing it? Yeah. So not only does it like not suck, but yes, do you enjoy it? So we definitely did think about the psychological component of sitting and eating a meal and enjoying it, but and enjoying the process of preparing your food. Sometimes I think
mm,
to myself, it's kind of actually insane how much time during a day you spend preparing food, eating food, doing the thing that happens after you eat the food. Like a huge chunk of our life is actually in one way or the other consumed or related to eating food. It takes a lot of time, and it's almost all, aside from the last part of eating the food, it's all social experience. So you prepare the food together, you eat the food together.
mm,
you know. So yeah, no, it's a big part of it. But I think for us, it factors in particularly to the acceptability of the process
mm.
metric. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out crockpots. Because like I like the
Except for
idea of just
Crockpots.
like you don't like crockpots?
Oh, no, I don't. Not personally. I think that they make the food's too wet. You should take
I
you
don't know.
got
I can't figure them out. Like the I follow the recipes, but they never turn out the way I can if I just spend 30 minutes making the thing. But I
Yep.
like the idea of just like, oh, I have like 15-minute break. I have to stand up or else I get carpal tunnel or something, and I can make food. And I walk away for 8 hours and it's done. But I
Yeah.
can't figure it out. But I like this idea of like of a crock pot where you can like set things up and then the food is made eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I would love to do that. I just haven't had good experiences with crock pots. Air fryers are pretty good though.
Hmm.
Have you used an air
Cook
fryer?
fast? No.
Yeah, they cook fast. And they have the advantage of making food crispy. Crock pots
Hmm.
cannot make crispy food. Everything comes out kind of like a stew, which is nice. It's
Yeah.
not like I got anything against stews, but they don't have so much of like making food tasty is controlling the amount of water content, is controlling the
Hmm.
water content, right? So if you can take food out of a crock pot and then like reduce the water, and maybe I don't have a huge amount of experience with crock pots. I just remember,
Yeah.
being a kid and eating crock pot food, and it wasn't that great. So, to all the people out there who enjoy eating crock pots, we support you, and I apologize for I don't mean to attack your way of crock pot life. But I personally have not particularly enjoyed crock pot food because, for me, you can always just put something on the stove and let it sit all day. I never understand what the point of the crock pot is, except that it can like turn off.
I once made a amazing potato soup, and then I had an interview, and I forgot it existed, and then I went back to it, and it was nothing but char.
And it
And
was
ever since then,
just like a
yeah,
hockey, like a
it,
potato hockey puck.
like, I had a spoonful of it, and I was like, great, now I can go do my interview,
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, it was char, and I was so sad.
Oh,
I
that's
called my wife.
funny.
I was so sad. But yeah, this kind of leads to like my rapid fire questions because I know we're coming to the end. But what is your favorite like I don't know either go to food or food that you enjoy? Because
Oh,
people
yeah.
food is so interesting. Yeah.
Oh my God, man, that's tough. I love food. The first thing that came to my mind was a sandwich because I just ate a really, really good sandwich a minute ago. There's something about just putting it all together and just it's like it comes in a thing and you cut it into triangles and you got all those
Yeah.
textures all crammed into one bite, which is really, really nice. I love Korean barbecue. And
Hmm.
I love Korean barbecue. I love dim sum. Um, I love a really good, thoughtfully prepared French meal. I mean, some of the best meals I've ever had. Oh my God. The food is so, so good. Uh, really good sushi is like that too. It's just the amount of like care and everything that goes into it. It just really feels like you're doing something kind of special. Like, oh my God, somebody made this beautiful, beautiful thing for me and it tastes so good. Mm, Croissant. I'd love to
Yeah.
just eat eat a croissant, like a good croissant
Yeah.
or really good baguette. Like it's hard to
Mm.
beat that, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I've never had French food, but I think that if you like sandwiches, a really cool sandwich you can make, and then I ask the next question. But it's a grilled cheese. You use like three different cheeses, whichever one you want, and then you put oven cooked bacon, so it's like really nice on top of it, and then you slice a tomato and you like kind of like put the tomato on a pan with like salt
Yeah.
and pepper on both sides.
Oh
You
yeah.
put that on there, and then you toast all of it, and
Mhm.
you eat that with tomato soup. It is amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're
It's
absolutely
terrible
right.
for you though. It's like 2,000 calories.
Great. I
It's a
think it's
lot.
worth it. Yeah, I had a BLT. That's actually what I ate earlier. Is I made a
Oh,
BLT.
okay.
So I was that guy like, making bacon at like 12:30 in the afternoon. Like
Dude, you're living the life.
a whole lot of bacon. I ate a lot of bacon this afternoon, I didn't wake up this morning thinking I was going to eat that much bacon, but I did.
Hmm.
And you make a very, very good point. It's very important to put salt on a tomato if you're going to put it with anything because it raises the water content like crazy and like lowers the flavors of everything. But if you put salt on it, man, like put in it a
It
little bit.
absorbs it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
If I want to really maximize like a flavor profile of what I'm making, I throw tomatoes in it and I slice them just enough for it to absorb because it'll absorb all the juices of a steak. And so it's like you get like a bonus steak with just
Holy,
eating the tomatoes.
oh my God, I never thought about that. Next time I'll do the dry aging in
Hmm.
the fridge with the steak and I'll put a tomato on top. I'll put salt and then put a tomato on top of it. Like these what are these it's beefsteak tomatoes. That's why they call them
Mm.
beef tomatoes.
Mm. And then this is a personal question, so it's cool if you want to skip it. But when were you the happiest in your life?
Jeez, dude, that's a real tough one. Happiest, because I don't want to overthink it, because that's a tough one. Happiest, man. Like happiest as in like most content or most joyful. Like
Probably the both of those combined is happiness.
both
Joy
of
and contentment sounds like happiness, I think, as a
both of
feeling.
those combined is happiness.
I mean, I think so. I don't know. Now I'm wondering if we have. Yeah, I wonder this all the time.
Yeah.
How many words do I think of, and that you think of, and they're not the same words? Like our definitions of them are entirely different. Like my shade of red is maybe a little bit more orange, and I'm like describing red as this beautiful thing. You're like, lol, that's orange. You know. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah,
happiness.
absolutely. I've been talking to a couple of friends that I have about, AI systems that can help to mitigate some of those discontinuities or ambiguities between, people communicating. And at some point it'd be really, really nice to have some AI emissaries who can talk back and forth to each other to be like, what he really means is this shade of red. And you're like, oh, that's what he's talking about, But but anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I have a lot of good memories. I don't know, like this is gonna sound really weird, but I think probably as exhausted as I am sometimes, I think weirdly enough, in terms of combination between joy and contentment, I'm probably happiest now because
Hmm.
I'm really I've got a great kid. She's so cool. She wears me out like you would not believe, but she's like amazing. Like she's like so much fun and she's learning how to tell jokes and stuff, and that's she's 5 years old and 5 years old, and I'm probably a bad parent for doing this, but she's pretty good at Street Fighter now, like she's fun to hang out with, and I'm very happy to like I've got a lot of good relationships. Like I love my family and I love my friends, and most of my friends are people that I work with. So but in doing things that we all really really deeply care about. So I feel very very lucky or blessed that I'm working with people that I love and that we're trying to do good stuff together. And I mean there's not a whole the one thing I wanted this year I really wanted to try to do is to really make an effort to do to go back to having more hobbies. I used to be like one of those like insane hobby collector where I just had like
Hmm.
a million things I was always doing. And I have a million things that I'm always doing now, but they're kind of within a few domains. And I miss going and just like coding something for fun or like writing a piece of music or writing a screenplay or just drawing and stuff like that, and I haven't been doing nearly as much of that the last few years, so I need to do that more, and I need to exercise a lot more. Like I gained a lot of weight a couple of years ago, and so I need to take care of that. But aside from those things, I honestly I'm really happy. But when I was 7 years old I think if I could picture some sort of like crystalline sort of happy time in my life, 7 years old was really, really, really good. That was a lot of fun. Just because it felt like you were kind of like smart enough to feel like you understood how the world worked, even though you kind of didn't. But it was before you started, or at least for me, before you started getting that kind of like pubescent sort of anxiety. It's like before that period where like 7 to 9, where it's like it's before you're starting to like, who am I? What am I doing here? When kind of puberty starts showing up and you start having to figure out how to like navigate social dynamics. But it's like you're older than a 5-year-old, so it's like, yeah, that's like that perfect kind of kid age where it's just like things are fun and you're just reading and drawing and running around and being crazy.
Mhm.
That was definitely a fun time. And then there was also a fun time and this was during the stressful teenage years or the anxious teenage sort of time, but my dad had this is like before all the Methuselah stuff, but my dad had kind of like semi-retired, and he came back after he had been doing kind of the Silicon Valley startup thing for several years, and he used to travel an awful lot when I was a kid. And then when I was like, I guess about 12 years old, 12, 13 or so, something like that, he kind of like he kind of semi-retired. He ended up obviously doing a lot of other stuff later, but there's like this kind of couple year period where I guess you could call it a sabbatical or something like that. And to me, it felt like he was working on a lot of ideas that he wanted to do, like future businesses or different things that he kind of wanted. But we spent a heck of a lot of time together just sitting around reading comic books and like watching sci-fi movies. And like that was like a lot of fun, especially after some of those early years when it felt like he was gone a decent amount of the time, because we lived outside of DC in Northern Virginia, and he would go, excuse me, and visit the West Coast to work, like a decent amount. And so when he those couple of years where we just like sat around and did that, just read a heck of a lot of comic books and watched a lot of movies, like that was fun.
Mhm.
That was like a fun time. And I had just started, I was in school. I was homeschooled for part of my childhood. So like I went to elementary school for that, first, well, I went to most of elementary school, and then for middle school I started homeschooling. And so that was right around the same time. So it was basically me like not doing my schoolwork because I could get it done in a couple hours and in the morning, and then I just had like all day to just like sit around and do whatever I wanted to. Like
Mhm.
had a lot of spare time, and I got to hang out with my dad, so that was fun.
Yeah. And then this will be our last question. Um, what is a problem, kind of circling back to the first thing you were talking about, like listening to people and their problems. What is a problem you're having right now that people listening could help out with?
Jeez.
Or just
Oh
in
my.
general. We don't have to have the solution for it.
A problem? God, I don't know,
Yeah.
man. Hmm. Well, let's see. I don't know if it's not a problem, but we're doing the Biomarkers of Aging Consortium has a data science challenge that we're doing. And
Mhm.
we want to have lots of people show up. So tell your friends about it. So that's around predicting chronological age and mortality and multimorbidity. Um, and we've got a really, really cool data science library that we put together. That's it's taken I mean, look, so let's see. There's about 50 epigenetic, let's call it 50, around 50 epigenetic clocks out there. It seems like way more than you'd need, but there are like 50. But we've got like 20 of some, like about 20, maybe a little bit more, of those clocks rebuilt in Python, so it's really, really easy to work with.
Mhm.
And then we're going to add the rest in the later. We're also adding proteomics and metabolomics and all sorts of stuff. You can also, it supports like very, very easy loading of data from the gene expression omnibus and NHANES and Framingham Heart Study and things like that. For anybody who's out there who wants to work with us on it, for us, we basically are just trying to open access as much as we possibly can to data sets, to predictive models of aging and mortality and morbidity, various bioinformatic tools. If anybody wants to help out to contribute data or to help contribute code or just, tell their friends or whatever it is, yeah, it would be awesome to have them as part of the project. It's a very open, collaborative sort of thing, and And so far it's going really, really well. But hey, the more the merrier. We would really love your listeners to show up and help us out, or tell us what we're doing wrong, or tell us what we're doing right, or tell us what we're doing medium, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah. So maybe that's the thing that would be good. Oh, and if there's anybody out there who's looking to fund companies, we have a gazillion pitch decks that cross our desk like constantly, and we can't unfortunately invest in all of them. So if anybody who's out there who's an angel, or who's looking to get involved to help support the companies that are in the space, feel free to reach out. I can put you in touch with just about anybody and help you
Mhm.
keep your ear to the ground about what sort of stuff is going on.
Sweet. Well, then, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, sharing your passion with us, and getting us excited for the future of humanity.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great meeting
All
you,
right.
Lowell.